Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this conference about leveraging AI in your daily PowerBuilder environment. Here is the agenda for our session today. First of all, we'll have a word about the state of AI to understand what we can expect in our field of expertise. Then I will introduce you to Visual Expert AI services that has been recently released. We'll take a look at the runtime architecture, and we talk about security and confidentiality that are quite important in this topic. And then I'll do some clicking to show you exactly how this is working. Finally, we'll have a Q&A session in case you have any questions or if you're wondering how this is going to work for you, please do not hesitate to ask us, and we're going to talk at the end of this presentation. A word about myself and about the company, who's been there for quite some time serving PowerBuilder.net, Oracle, and SQL Server developers. The recent product we released were related to providing MFA multi-factor authentication for PowerBuilder, the integration with PowerBuilder and Entra ID, and the topic we're going to talk about today, AI services that will help you understand and improve your code. The next round will bring a new module that is meant to help managing the life cycle of defect that we can find in your code with Visual Expert. So before looking at the AI feature we recently implemented, I wanted to discuss briefly the state of the art in AI. Of course, most of you probably use AI already, and you're all aware of its recent progress. That's fine. So we can skip the obvious comments and address some more specific questions, like how good is AI now for performing development tasks or assisting us in our daily work? To what extent are companies nowadays already adopting AI? And what are the remaining obstacles and how to overcome them to get there? So I collected some recent facts and statistics to illustrate and help with this discussion. First, I wanted to recap the evolution of AI to make sure we're on the same page about where we are and what's coming in the foreseeable future, because there's a lot of discussion and fantasy about AI and where it may become so powerful. So in theory, there are three major phases in the evolution of AI in the long run, right? The first one is called ANI, that's for artificial narrow intelligence. That's basically the AI we have for a few years now. We're talking about chatbot, image recognition, medical diagnosis, etc. These are specialized and they are designed to perform specific tasks or a limited set of tasks. They have no overall understanding nor any awareness of or any ability to adapt outside of their predefined domain. The second phase is called AGI, and that's for artificial general intelligence. And in theory, this AI could learn and adapt to new contexts like a human, basically. And it would combine logic, creativity, memory, simulated emotion, and it would have a global understanding of the world. To be honest, no AI model come close at the moment, and all the experts seriously doubt that the technology could reach this level in the foreseeable future. And the first step is called ASI for artificial superintelligence. This is the kind of AI you find in the Terminators and Hollywood movies, that would surpass human capabilities in all areas, science, creation, strategy, intuition, could design new AIs on its own and potentially redefine our relationship with intelligence. No need to say that this is purely theoretical. That's belong to the domain of science fiction. So no player in the field of AI pretend to ever come close to achieving this, of course. Just to recap, we are basically now in the AI field and we will remain there for quite some time. That being said, ANI has gradually developed new talent, and that's becoming interesting just to understand what we can leverage in our field. You'll know, of course, ChatGPT and its ability to hold a conversation, and you'll probably also try generating different contexts with AI. Okay, that's fine. But recently, Reasoning AI had an interesting addition to the mix thanks to its ability to follow logical reasoning in several steps. It can partially correct itself, and it can also solve certain problems. So in our field, our development tool, This can produce good results without having to go through multiple trial and error to guide the AI, which would be a deal breaker. So that's where it becomes interesting for us. However, reasoning AI must be used with caution because while they have a good local logic, they have a very poor global vision and they are neither autonomous nor error-free. AI still makes mistakes, no matter what. Finally, this year we saw the emergence of agentic AI, which can execute, a sequence of tasks with an overall objective. It still depends on the human instruction and verification, but it allows combining reasoning AI and the execution of certain action using tools like the web browser or the API to use a third-party product, etc. So for visual expert, we are leveraging reasoning AI with a predefined set of functionalities to explain, comment, improve code, etc. And these AI features that we implemented are, let's say, prefiguring the first software maintenance agent that will be capable of suggesting, checking, and then acting, still under human supervision, of course, but that will go a long way in terms of productivity for the maintenance of your applications. With that being said, let's see exactly how good AI, and in particular ANI, is now. So, of course, no doubt its power is constantly increasing. There's a lot about this in the news. But how can this be practically measured, and to what extent does it translate into useful result for us developers? So here is the result of an IQ test carried out by an organization called trackingai.org. They show that some model now can compete with humans in terms of brute power, IQ. However, this does not reflect the weaknesses of AI. There's another organization called ArcPrice that has developed a series of tests to assess the limit of the type of task that AI can handle. And these tests are public and open to both human and AI. And they may seem simple, but they are actually posing a significant challenge for AI. So you have here an example. You can see the example on the top, and you need to fill the test below. You can see that there's some kind of symmetry, and in red, you should add the different dot to complete the symmetry in the test figure. This might seem quite simple, but AI was not trained for this. And here you can see that most models struggle to exceed, let's say, a 60% success rate with this type of tests. And things get even more complicated with a second series of tests that require AI to demonstrate both a high adaptability and a high efficiency. And this second series of tests is even harder on AI because, as you can see, although it's easy for humans to pass the test, it requires AI to have a global perspective and the ability to adapt to changing context. And for that, most models have a success rate below 10%, and the best one not even reach 20%. And this success rate has barely evolved recently, despite the recent progress in AI and all you hear in the news about how powerful it gets. So what does this tell us in terms of shortcomings and in particular the reliability of the responses? This test result illustrate the current limitations regarding the type of task that AI can handle and the reliability of the result, as we said. So several points we can mention. First of all, AI is only effective for certain tasks for which it has been trained before. That's exactly the focus of the ANI, narrow intelligence. The second point is AI is effective at performing individual tasks within a predefined context, but only humans have a global perspective and can adapt and make decisions. The newer model of AI are less likely to hallucinate, to make mistakes. However, no matter how good AI is, it will keep making mistakes no matter what. And also, it will confidently keep giving you the wrong answer. It cannot evaluate its own capability, and you can't ask AI to verify or explain its logic. You can't do that. The next point that is related to this is AI needs a context, a detailed context and precise instructions to work. This is why with Visual Expert, we had, by the way, to format all the AI queries to be very specific about the expected result and select certain relevant data we found during the code analysis to provide AI with an appropriate context. By default, AI agrees with everything you say. So the technical reasons behind this are complex, but you need to give precise instruction to avoid ending up basically with a sophisticated yes man. It will keep otherwise misleading you. So bottom line, in our field, human involvement is mandatory to guarantee a good result. This is sometimes called co-intelligence, which means that either AI generates results that human would verify, or AI help humans validate and improve their production. But basically, they have to work together to make the best of the AI capabilities. But reliability is not the only shortcoming. We should also talk about security and compliance, a big topic. Anytime you talk about using AI in company, this topic immediately comes up. So regulation and risk actually are currently the primary obstacle that is mentioned by all the companies. And I included in this series of slides a number of links to very interesting studies that are published by Deloitte, by different firms. If you get the slides, you will follow the link if you like, and you will learn some very interesting results and statistics about the state of AI. So according to Deloitte, most companies would mention this obstacle as the primary reason to at least pause their adoption of AI. They all must obviously prohibit the disclosure of secrets and also ensure compliance with all the personal and sensitive data protection regulation. To address these issues, most stakeholders are step by step progressively implementing appropriate measures. First of all, 59% of the US companies have implemented AI governance, according to a Pacific study. And more interesting, 98% of them plan to increase their AI governance budget. They are all taking this direction. In Europe, they just passed an AI Act to increase the trust and set the corresponding regulatory requirements. An all paid model with all providers can now guarantee data confidentiality by contract. In the case of Visual Expert, same story, we have a DPA in place that prohibits any access to your data or your extract of code, whether it's for training AI or any other reason. So with that being said about the shortcomings and obstacles, what do we know about the actual AI adoption in 2025? So let's talk a bit about AI adoption nowadays, first by individuals and then by companies. So in terms of individual use, we have reached now approximately 1 billion regular users. That includes 800 million for OpenAI, which is for now the leader. And what is impressive, in my opinion, is the time it took to reach this billion regular user. For ChatGPT, it could reach that in about 3 years and a half. So if you compare to other technologies like internet, smartphone, Facebook, it's much faster. So yeah, obstacle, but still the adoption is going very fast. In the US, 62% of the population already use it at least once a week. Out of these, 27% use it for professional purposes, according to another research. And in terms of businesses, 72% of the companies use AI at least in one of the functions in their companies. 36% of them use them for IT functions, according to McKinsey. That is directly relating to our field of expertise. But the maturity is still low. Only 1% of the business report fully using AI, and only 12% of them say that employees have received the proper training. But the financial impact is already visible. 17% of the companies report a gain in their EBIT, which is at least 5% according to McKinsey. So what's the key takeaway for all of this? First of all, AI is now capable of performing complex tasks, and in particular in our field, it can generate different type of useful content for developers, code, correction, comments, etc., or help them to validate their production. But AI still makes mistakes and is limited in its overall vision and decision making. So human intervention and co-intelligence is required to leverage its capabilities. The adoption of AI in business has begun already, but it's currently being held back by the risk. But standard and governance are being put in place to manage this risk. So company must now define their AI governance rules, and supplier must comply with them or be prepared to comply with their emerging standards. Benefits and productivity gains are now proven for businesses. So company will inevitably have to adopt AI to remain competitive. And the first company to do so will gain an advantage over its competitors. We believe now supplier can prepare their solution and teams to meet this growing demand, and users or companies can think about predictive use case, study the available solutions, and consider how they can leverage this huge productivity gain in their own business process. So with that in mind, we developed a series of AI services that I'm going to explain right now. First of all, a recap about the use cases that we cover with Visual Expert and where we placed AI functionalities to go one step beyond the traditional functionality. Visual Expert is usually used to, first of all, understand existing code, in particular large, mature, legacy PowerBuilder applications that are very comprehensive, very powerful, but also very complex. Then, to help with the maintenance, we would secure changes by performing impact analysis anytime you're about to make a change. We can clean up the code to streamline the maintenance, check different kind of problems, bug, maintainability, and also scan for security vulnerabilities. You can improve the response time, the performance, by identifying some slow object, and we can help to upgrade to, for example, a new version of PowerBuilder by detecting some obsolete functionalities that have to be replaced. Not so many of them, but it's always helpful to find them easily. So in this map of the use cases, we've been adding AI services in different categories, whether it's for helping to understand or to fix problem. And AI is always a way to go one step beyond. So for example, here, I'll show you some example, but we've been adding some functional explanation. In this category, we can ask AI to fix problems for us, to optimize a slow piece of code, or to replace a functionality with another by keeping the same business in the same object. So what's now Visual Expert in 2025? There are mainly now three parts. A traditional set of code analysis services, there are almost 200 of them. There's now a web platform for about 2 years now that allows and simplify the collaboration between all the stakeholders of the project. You can find a problem and pass it along to your colleague with a simple URL, for example. And there is now a set of AI services that extend the functionality that were traditionally related to code analysis. So just a bit more detail about the AI services. First of all, two of them would, for the first one, explain a certain object or a method from a business perspective. So with Visual Expert, we had this capability to generate some technical documentation, explain a lot of stuff from a technical perspective. AI can tell us what this window, PowerBuilder window, for example, is accomplishing, or what is this huge stored procedure doing in the application. And there's also another functionality that I can show you to explain the business logic, which are basically explaining the main technical functionalities that have been developed by the developer initially in this uh, script, for example. We can ask AI to generate comments and insert them in the code, especially if it's a long method that you have to rework. You're not familiar with this code and it takes time to read the code, understand. So AI can generate comment in line to help you read and understand what the code is about. With Visual Expert, there's a whole code inspection module, hundreds of rules that detect different categories of problems. So anytime you find a problem, you can choose to either fix it manually, or you can now ask AI to fix it for you, or at least suggest a solution that you can decide to use or not. And it's the same for optimizing code, in particular for performance tuning. Say you find a slow query, I'll show you an example, then you can fix it. So how is this working? A word about the architecture. There's a number of code parser, PowerBuilder, database code, etc., that read the code, extract tons of information to place that in a repository, a database. And from this, we can leverage this information on screen or to generate different kind of document, either on a local PC for a small piece of code and a one-man band, but in most cases, it's more of a client-server configuration where you have an instance of Visual Expert running the code analysis on the server side, storing the results here. You can schedule the code analysis. Then for about 2 years now, we have this web server that is now making the whole result and the whole set of functionality available to anyone in your organization through a web browser. So they don't have to install anything. They don't have to wait for the Visual Expert client to start. It's immediately available. And you can also deploy that. We have projects that are working across different continents. So they can set up one web server somewhere. Anybody who has a valid account can then access it, because there's, of course, a set of access control functionality to make sure that the code remains confidential. Now about AI. Anytime either the web client or the desktop client will ask a question to AI, this will be passed to our cloud service, a service operated in the cloud by Novalis, to shape the question and pass it along to our sub-processor that is currently OpenAI, that will send us back the result. Again, the cloud service will put that in a proper shape to incorporate and display it in the web client. And all this stack, all this silo is meant and built to be highly confidential. We have a contract in place, data protection agreement in place with OpenAI. So any extract of code that is sent to AI will remain confidential. OpenAI cannot access it for any reason, training or any other purpose. And only the people who have access to your repository can view this piece of code, and no one else. A focus about security and data confidentiality, because we mentioned that it's a very important topic nowadays to simplify the deployment of AI. It's first of all, as a reminder, Visual Expert is a read-only tool. We do not modify anything in your code or your database. We do not access any business data. We only analyze the code and object definition. We do not touch the data or view the data itself. And when we use AI, it's only a request and an extract of code that is shared with the cloud service. At no point the data is accessible to any third party, nor Novalis, nor anyone, because of a DPA in place, and it will never be used for AI training. And all the way there's an encryption, TLS in transit, and AES at rest. And the data retention is limited under 30 days. Either you instruct to delete everything, or it will be deleted automatically at the end of the service. And in the meantime, it will be kept in the cloud service to build for you a knowledge base of your application and enrich the understanding of the AI of your application to make the result, the feedback even better. And there's a full access control, of course. You can decide who can use Visual Expert, and you can also decide if and when you want to enable the AI services. Let's do that now in action. And for that, I will use 3 use cases. For each of them, we'll start using traditional code analysis feature, and we will go one step beyond using the AI services that were recently added. First of all, we'll understand and explain existing legacy code. Then we'll take the example of a problem found during the code inspection where we identify the problem in the code, and then we can use AI to suggest a fix. And finally, we'll use AI to help for improving performance. After identifying performance problem, AI can help us optimize a query in particular. So we'll start with an example of understanding and explaining existing code. Let's say that I have to refactor a certain business process, and I would like to understand everything about this code and data involved. I can start, for example, by selecting the data related to this business process. So based on a list of tables, for example, I would select those data involved in this business process, like refactoring the management of our customer contract, for example. And then I can generate a matrix to understand in a two-dimension matrix which object is using which data. So for example, here I have the customer table, and here I have the list of objects using this table. And in the cell, I can see how it's using it. So this is a data window reading from customer. This one is reading and updating. Then later on, I have some PowerBuilder events. And in that case, because I have an Oracle backend, I also have some Oracle functions and procedures. And if I have a large matrix, I can also filter. So for example, here, show me only the object reading from this table. Now, let's say that this high-level vision is fine, but now I want to dig deeper and understand more about the actual code. So for example, here I can click on this R for reading, meaning that this data window is reading from the table customer. If I click on this, this will open the tree view and show me that this data window is reading from the table customer. I can see the SQL behind the data window. And then I'd like to know where is this data window used. And for that, I can run an impact analysis. And this will show me that this window is used in, this data window is used in a window that is including a couple of command buttons. And if I'm not aware of what this window is doing, that's where I can use AI, for example, to ask about the business and also about the logic behind this window. So once I get this result, I can, for example, click here and see a brief description of the business behind this window. Of course, this is a sample application. There is barely enough code to have AI say anything. In a real-life application, the code is richer, and so is the business behind it. By the way, I've been here opening this page that you can find on the Visual Expert website in the section documentation, where you see some example of real-life applications. This was generated from a customer window where you can see quickly what the window is about, and it's always about a brief description to guide the developer. Then you have other examples, and the funny thing is I've been using those applications for a very long time for testing purposes, and it's only with AI that I finally understood what the application was about. Anyway, AI will summarize in a nutshell what this window or PowerBuilder event or Oracle package, function, SQL Server procedure, etc. is doing. So that's a good way for the developer to get a hint about the business behind this particular object. And you have the equivalent in terms of logic, which is more of the technical functionalities implemented by the developer. Again, this is a very small sample application with barely no code inside, but when the code is richer, so is the explanation generated by the AI. Now, to complete this panorama, I can also select the window and directly open the documentation generated by Visual Expert, where you can see for this object, for example, the ancestor hierarchy, the list of attribute, object, event that you can open to navigate in the documentation anytime you need. Control, again, the event of each control, and the architecture of the window where you would see what's inside, which control, data window, etc. inside the window. So this will give us a decent overview of this object. Now, if I want to do the same on the database side, it's pretty much the same story. I can select here, for example, a procedure that is reading from this table to understand what's behind it. Visual Expert tells me that there's actually 3 select statements in this procedure that are reading from the same table and that I can view one by one. And it's the same story. I can also ask AI to explain the business, explain the logic. I can even ask it to generate some comment inside of this procedure. And as I did for the PowerBuilder windows, I can explain the business of this particular stored procedure, learn about the business logic, how it was implemented by the developer. And in that case, there was not so many comments inside, which is why I ask AI to generate some comments down, in line, where it would be step by step explaining certain step taken by the code to clarify the intent of the developer and make it easier to read for someone who doesn't know this procedure or this part of the application. So just like that, I came from a high-level overview of the business process down to explaining object, popular object, data windows, windows involved, procedures from a technical angle, a business perspective, and a logic behind it. So that's for the first example. Now let's see how we can use AI to go beyond the traditional feature when it comes to finding and fixing problems in the code. Start usually like this. A visual expert is using hundreds of different rules to check the code under different angles, security, quality, performance, etc. There are different ways to explore those results. It's all about dealing with the volume and prioritizing what's important for you. For example, based on this dashboard, which gives you a high-level vision of each category of problem, you can, for example, focus on critical problems. You would click here. This page is opening, listing the evolution of the number of critical problems over time. It's supposed to go down, of course, as long as you fix the problems. And here you have a list of rules that correspond to this severity of problems. So let's take this example of a vulnerability for PowerBuilder code where it says that database queries should not be vulnerable to injection attack. If I click on this, and I see that there are 11 cases of code like this. If I click, this page will open telling me about this rule and the object found that are not compliant with this rule. I have a summary here, if needed, of the reason why and the description of the rule with examples of non-compliant and compliant code to guide the developer. For each of those problems, I can view them in detail. By the way, while using this web platform, you can at any time pass a certain URL to your colleague. If there's one person in charge of continuous integration, code verification, etc., you can find like these categories of problems that have to be fixed and send them by mail or with a Jira task or an instant message to a colleague that would open automatically the same list to find the same problems and take it from there. So this other person would, for example, take the object one by one to view what is the problem inside of the code. This is where we see in that particular case that there's a concatenation of string which open the possibility of an injection attack. Now, the developer can either fix it manually to write the code differently or click here to request a solution to AI. So this opens the Code Explorer with the same method, in that case, a PowerBuilder event. And then AI will search for the solution and suggest it right here. So this is the initial code where the problem is highlighted. And that's an alternate possibility. So we can see here, highlighted in green, the code that was modified by the AI, as well as some comment added to explain the nature of the change with some general explanation right here. If that is suitable for the developer, it can either copy those lines or even the entire script and paste it in the PowerBuilder IDE or in the Oracle development tool in case that's on the database side. Same for SQL Server, of course. So in that case, AI is going one step beyond. Instead of fixing manually, we can use AI not only to save time, but also to understand more about the good practice so that the next occasion when there's this type of dynamic SQL required, the developer would write it differently and avoid this vulnerability or possibility of injection attack. Now let's see our use case number 3, where I will use AI for performance tuning on top of the traditional code inspection or code analysis feature. There are different ways and different angles to identify and fix performance problem with Visual Expert. The first one would simply be to look at certain categories of rules, for example, those who are related to query optimization. In most cases, this rule will identify some problems that will affect the performance. For example, here we have a rule stating that SQL statements should not join too many tables. There are 7 examples of that in the code. As we did before, I can click on this, find the non-compliant object, and for each of them, take a look at the code. If needed, by the way, share this particular problem with the developer who would be in charge of fixing it. And here I can ask AI to suggest a solution, which is what we did before. It will rephrase the code in particular, and in that case, the query to make it better. Okay. But the second example, the second angle to do that is from the Code Explorer itself. I have the possibility to find the slowest object. So there is a process to collect, generate and collect some trace file, performance data, when the application is running, to know how many times each object has been executed and what is the average execution time. Then we pass this information to Visual Expert that will combine it with the code analysis and provide this kind of information where we can see, for example, for each PBL across the entire application, what is the slowest object. This is for the entire application, but you could do that for any granularity, for example, inside a single PBL or inside a single object, if you like. And then you would see step by step, depending on your granularity, what is the slowest code. And the same goes for the database side. You can find the slowest procedure like that. And you can even break down when there's a large volume of code, the different blocks and or queries inside this, in that case, inside this procedure. We find here a slow SQL, and then you can go to the AI section right here and ask AI to optimize this SQL statement. Then AI would, as we did before to fix a problem, suggest an alternate version of the code with some explanation about the different points and the different changes made for optimization purposes. In green, the code modified with some comment explaining the nature of the changes made. And finally, the last example I wanted to show is meant to help developers migrate to the latest version of PowerBuilder or even to their database, Oracle or SQL Server. There's also a list of rules, different categories of rules that are meant for that. For example, here I can find in my application if some object should be replaced, deprecated or obsolete features. In that case, there's only one of them. Then the rest of the story is the same. You get a list of the unsupported, non-compliant object, and you can find what's in place, what has to be replaced in the code. If needed, you can ask AI to suggest a solution. And the same goes for Oracle. If you migrated to a certain version of Oracle, some rules will tell you if and where certain objects have to be updated to comply with the new syntax supported by the new version of your database. So that's it for our presentation today about the new possibilities of AI and how we implemented it to help developers maintain their application. We have some time to answer some questions. If anyone has questions, please let us know and we can chat.
Now is Q&A time. Welcome to join our live Q&A Zoom meeting with the presenter. You'll find the Zoom meeting link at the top of the chat panel and also in the resources area below. Just click and join us live. You can enter the meeting from the Zoom app or your browser. Just type your name and click Join. You'll be in a waiting room until the meeting starts, and you'll join automatically once it begins. Now that you're in, you have 10 minutes to ask the presenter any questions about this session. Don't miss the chance.